Meeting, please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Located.
Do we have roll call, please?
Butter.
Here.
Commissioner Big.
Here.
Morale.
Here.
Councilman Vasquez.
Here.
Councilman Stone.
Here.
Councilman Harris.
Here.
Councilman Rita.
Here.
Councilman Sin.
Present.
Brickyard.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, first on the agenda is the approval of minutes from January 28th, 2025. Do we have a motion?
Approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we're moving on to new business, and this is pretty much the only business that we'll be discussing tonight, and hopefully this won't take too long. I know some people don't want this to be a long meeting. But
Who are
Attorney McClure and myself and Councilman Bozak and Amanda Black, who is our consultant from Capital Cities, had a conference call to discuss the request from the airport to borrow money. And what we found out in advance of that meeting is Amanda looking at the statute and realizing that as the statute currently stands, we are unable to do that sort of transaction. Now, it's not unreasonable to think that we thought that was possible because in the past we were able to lend money out to other municipalities. And so what we didn't realize is when the new legislation came through to allow us to invest in securities, equities, that ability was left out of the statute. So I am going to turn this over to Attorney McClure because he actually came up with 3 different scenarios. And why don't we just go through them one by one, Scott, and discuss them after each one rather than reading all 3 together. Let's just start with the first one, and then we'll move on to the second one and so forth.
All right, so the first half, let's stick with in the foundation. Wanted to remain in there on statutory options number 2. There is an argument to be made for the term home rule to be that we in marketable security based upon the state not having that necessarily defined statute, but it runs into, once we're over that hurdle, then runs into the hurdle of the fiduciary language and the prudent investment rule within the statute. So I don't think the home rule interpretation of marketable security is advisable. So that leaves us with, again, staying with the foundation. If this was something to be done through the foundation, it would require some tinkering with the statute, I guess is the easiest way to say it, whether it was to allow a certain percentage to be utilized for local redevelopment type projects, and it would have to obviously deal with the prudent investment rule and the fiduciary requirements of our investor. If it's
Wait, can we just stop right there? So the first option is that we just claim home rule and we just do it anyway. That's option number 1. And we could run into difficulties because we have to pass the fiduciary standard, and our investment consultant would have a problem with it because that is not within her fiduciary responsibilities to approve. So option number 1 is just do it anyway, and we would run into an issue with that. Does everybody understand that option? Anybody have a question about that option? Anybody want to pursue that option? Home rule. Going once, going twice. Okay, can we go to the third option where we take the money out? Can you talk about that one, and then we'll talk the second one where we change the legislation?
So a statutory option the county has, this has nothing to do with our foundation or foundation statute, but just in the regular statutes or tools available to us. This 5-11414 allows for a revolving loan. It basically is following the idea of intercounty, local redevelopment type project. It allows for the county to create a revolving loan fund to be able to make loans out to other entities within the county on those redevelopment type projects. It has to be funded with lit. So, is there a way to be able to do the gymnastics if we needed to do or wanted to do a revolving loan fund? The answer is yes. There is a way to do these. The hurdles to be able to make the money available. When you go through the entire path, the biggest downside to that is that it would still require 10 votes out of the foundation, because that's the only place there's any money right now that would be able to be moved around to fund a revolving loan account. So under those scenarios, we would need to pull it out of here on a 10-0 vote, place it into the revolving loan fund, set the terms out that other local redevelopment type projects could have loans, and then we could facilitate it through that scenario.
Hey, Scott, sorry, Miss
Go ahead.
President.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So we went from, I think it was 3.25 to 5%, and that's the reason why, correct? Because we hit our threshold, why we'd have to have a 10-0 vote?
No, it's because we would need to be able to, I guess let me say, if we had $30 million in the general fund unallocated, and the council wanted to move $5 million over to a revolving loan fund, you could. I'm going to the example of the foundation because I'm unaware of any other large dollars available to be able to fund a revolving loan fund. That's why it seems a bit confusing. Their issue.
Oh, you mean one-time money would be a 10-0 vote because I got you. There's not, we don't have any in a reserve fund.
Right. We don't have rainy day.
Our foundation
20 million
account doesn't have $3 million, $4 million, $5 million.
If the foundation holding account had 15 million and we wanted $5 million in
no problem.
revolving loan account, we could do that.
Okay.
And now, and just let's talk about a couple of complications with regard to that. Is we don't have any capacity right now that's set up that can manage a revolving loan account. So either the auditor, the treasurer, or somebody would have to be assigned to managing a revolving loan account. And I'm not sure where that responsibility would lie or whether they're even equipped to do something like that. So I thought maybe if they were listening to this and they might want to comment on it.
Money in, money out, right?
Yeah. The concept is, I mean, we set up a separate fund, and it would be a one-time transfer. Then we did it for whatever the designated capital project would be. But other than that, I mean, from I guess our standpoint, the logistics and fundamentals of it are quite simple. It's just getting them actual money to the fund. So,
well, some of the more difficult logistics come in. How much? What limitates? It's writing the loan program. That's the more difficult part. It's being able to say we're going to make a, hypothetically we're making $10 million available in the revolving loan. Well, can one entity come get $8 million of it? Is there limits? Is there timing? And that's what need to be built out once the fund was.
And then I want to ask too, is there anything that we can do to tighten up what those funds can be used for so that once you get the 10-0 vote to pull that money out of the foundation, it's out. And you never need a 10-0 vote for those dollars again. So 15 years down the road, all those monies have been paid back. You've got $10 million sitting there in cash. and the council says, hey, we need 8 million for this thing, and we don't want to let it out. We just want to take that money because we need it, and that's a place that we can take it from. So I'm just wondering if legally we can structure it such that that can't happen, that it has to be used for the intended purposes.
But
Once the money was moved out of the foundation, then we're just under the regular government rules. Whatever additional government rules we put on ourselves would be able to be modified locally also because we created them. So if we pass an ordinance saying there's these restrictions, that ordinance is good until there's enough votes to change that ordinance.
couldn't it be just put back? Like when the money comes back in, just automatically put it back into the foundation fund? Could it be worked that way? And then we wouldn't have to worry about it being used for something else down the road?
So you're saying just approve like the one-time project?
Well, we'll pull it out, and then as it's being repaid, have that money be put back in. I'm just asking. I don't know.
Sounds logical to me.
Yeah.
I think I'm not speaking for Barb. No. I'm not speaking for Barb. What I was thinking was, say we allocated $15 million, and then 7 years into it, council says, "Oh no, we need that." I mean, that's a simple loan agreement that's not going to be breached. I mean,
I would have to look at the statute, but the original foundation, when we funded the foundation, my memory serves, the fiscal and the executive had to pass substantially similar resolutions. So to return the money back to the foundation would take the same path. I don't think you can vote 10-0, take it out of the foundation, and as part of that vote say, whenever it's paid back, it must come back. Once it's out, and to put it back in, you got to follow the process to take it out, and you got to follow the process to put it back in.
makes sense.
So it's just subject to additional votes, and depending on how often those votes occurred, if it say was once a year because that's when a principal payment and some interest was made, we'd have to have that every year. And as long as we had that consensus, that money would return to the foundation. However, I'm assuming if we start a revolving loan fund, it's never gonna all be paid back, because that's the whole point of starting the revolving loan fund, right? So I would assume however much theoretical money was set aside for this would just be churning, because there would always be a local redevelopment project that was next up for that.
Scott, what if we wanted to use dollars in that account that had been repaid to satisfy the withdrawal rate? So instead of taking the 3.25% out, we took money out of that and put it into the foundation holding account.
If we were at 3.25, that could be a viable option for a few years. The additional,
You have to build up.
yeah, what we were, I think we got, was that an additional 3 million?
Mhm.
So again, if we were at 3.25 and we turned it up to 5 for a couple of years, that money came over to into the holding account. We're not dealing with principal now. Now we're dealing with earnings. Those earnings could come out and still have to do some moving around because the money has to be funded through lit on the revolving fund. But again, it's possible.
Yeah.
But if we take 10 million out of the foundation, everybody can do the math about how much we lose on the reoccurring interest payments that we rely on. So it's all a balancing act.
But that's one thing I wanted to bring up to you, because one of these days I might, depending on how this SB1 shakes out and how this lit conversation shakes out, is, we had close to 200 million with the market the way it's been the last couple of days. I don't know, 190, 185, whatever we have in there, say 190. We might have to. The reason why I think this was good for the airport to do this was get an exercise in actually how this foundation actually works, and I think it could be good economically to borrow the airport money on a fixed term. They pay us back at 5%. We don't lose anything, but with what's coming down the pike, And with that and coming from the governor's office, for me, it's kind of a dead deal. But I'm glad we're at least having this conversation because I think it could be good for if, say, the city of Portage needed money for, a project they want to do, we knew they could pay back. Why not? We don't have to pay the lawyer, the underwriter. We could save money that way. That's why I thought it was a pretty good, at least a good idea to start the conversation on this money.
Yeah, does
One of the
anybody have any questions on that particular? Oh, Harold, sorry.
no, I just wanted to mention the question that I had, and Scott has been much deeper in the weeds than I have. I'm just sort of getting up to speed on it. But the statute authorizing these revolving loan seems to require that the funds be that funds come from lit, and so you'd have to deal with that complicating factor as well. The money's will come out of the foundation because that's the only place they're at, and you'd have to generate.
We'd have to play a shell game with the money, right?
It would be
Correct.
And that was my question was everybody, there's a certain amount that we need in there to hit our bogey of, is it $7 million between E911, the sheriff's, Opportunity Enterprises? I think it's like $7 million, $7-8 million. I don't know what that bogey is. It might be like 150, 160, I believe. So theoretically, there is money to use without hurting the services that we're providing right now with that money. I just don't know where the level's at, and I'm sure they could provide us with.
Well, I think we should probably dive into that math.
Because if we're going to be talking about raising lit and doing other things, I think everybody here needs to know what is that dollar amount that we could take every year with a 10-0 vote, because the up to 5% didn't 10-0 vote, just need a simple majority. This would need a 10-0 vote, but if we needed money for the next 3 years until they figure this debacle out, it would be nice to know how much we could actually take out of that foundation and not hurt our underlying departments that are using the money. I'm thinking it's right around 150, give or take, but
Well, I can say I know enough about math to know that we'll be surprised at whatever the actual answer is when we have her sitting here and we say we have 190. Let's assume we take out 10 million a year for 3 years.
I was thinking more like 7. Yeah.
Well, but that
Not 10, but
We're in the same ballpark. What that would do if we also had to stay at the same budgetary amount,
right.
meaning the foundation. I think the foundation budget's around 6.3, 6.5.
Yeah.
So, but I think the leadership of the foundation should get with Capital Cities and give them that exact question. And when we come back, let's see what that looks like. Because I think that is an important part of the overall lit discussion.
but the one kind of number that you really should be looking at, not whatever the value is today, but you really should be looking at the 20-quarter average, because that is the true number that we should be looking at when we're looking to take out principal. We need to understand what that number is and then pull money from that dollar amount, because the market fluctuates from day to day. You even said, it was like a $5 million fluctuation from.
But I'm assuming Capital is going to tell us 150 at, is going to be your average over 20 quarters. I'm not assuming that she's going to say today at $190 million.
Well, I think, again, that's why I think we need Capital City to give us, because I think we give them a scenario. It's $7 million a year for 4 years or 4 years, whatever we tell them. We put show us our quarterly average going down. Show us what our spend percent would have to be to be able to meet our budget. Show us what happens if we do this. Because I think that's what I think we're all going to have to see it on a graph to be able to grasp it.
Because if I'm right, the Capital Cities did say leaving it at 3.25% was better than leaving it at 5% long term. They said
in 16 years, I think
you'd be better to actually capture, if you needed capture the 20 million up front instead of doing 5% for the next 30 years.
Right, I think it was 16 years.
Whatever the 16,
like
20 years.
Yeah.
Correct.
But the other thing too that we have to be cognizant of is, let's say we pull out $10 million out of the 20-quarter average. The problem is in January of the following year, you have 4 quarters with a lower dollar amount, but you have 16 quarters with a higher amount. And my recommendation would be in terms of doing that smoothing is we reduce those 16 quarters by whatever that dollar amount is that we pull out from principal to make sure that when we pull out the 3 1/4 or 5% for that year, that we aren't pulling out too much money.
Can I ask why are we talking about pulling principal out? What am I missing here? What is the purpose, the intent of this?
The intent of this meeting was for Kyle to come up and look for a loan for $5 million to, I think, redevelop the airport.
A loan from
A loan
the foundation, but why are we talking about pulling principal now? We're,
Because it could be an option, just like raising lit and other things we might have to do if, you know, we have to cut $6, $7, $8 million out of our budget. I mean, I think going back to 2021 would absolutely kill us.
I like the legislative path. I mean, and I really like what it's talking about here is because if you look, and I've been saying the last couple foundation meetings, let's look at alternative investments. Let's look at real estate. If you look at bonds, they're not returning anything. They haven't for a while. So if we can turn around and loan money for infrastructure that and get back, whatever the rate is, one of the municipalities would have to go to 3, 4, 5%, and we get that. We don't have to pull anything out there.
And then they don't have to pay lawyers, underwriters. It saves the town money. And I look at the foundation as if we're going to do something with it, to have it in 20 years, have $300 million, I would rather have, maybe 30, 40, 50 million of it go to investment where, Valpo, Portage, Chester, and they have a project that they can't do, they can afford it, but they need a bridge loan, and if we can set aside certain money to spur some of that economic activity I think it's a great thing, but it just right now is kind of a.
Well, let's talk about the third option, and that's changing the legislation, because I think from this board's perspective, that might be our best option. If we can change the legislation such that we can, in essence, create a bond, we sell the bond to the borrower, so they're paying it. They're making interest, or they're making interest payments to the foundation, and that way, capital cities can actually count that as part of their fixed income portfolio in the very, very safe dollars. And because that money, that loan from us to them is very safe, because if for some reason they're not paying that back, we can actually pay ourselves back before we give them the funds from the taxes. So, however, we just don't feel that is a pathway right now, because we don't think we can accomplish that in this current legislation, this cycle. So that would mean the earliest that we'd be able to do something would be next year.
President. But I think it's great we're talking about it, because if it all gets on our radar and we think it could be a good thing, then maybe we.
Anytime we're using money to invest in a community, obviously that's.
I agree with you.
And Valpo's like just using the airport example, it's like the second or third busiest airport in the state.
Oh, that brings me to my second, or maybe fourth comment. Fifth comment. I like to talk. What about Kyle going to the RDA? I think the RDA was responsible for helping Gary I think they might have contributed $50 million for a run.
I called him that same day, and he was calling the very next day to see if he could set up an appointment.
Because that right there would be a nice olive branch for the RDA to show that, hey, you know what? Gary got 50, we got 5. Okay, live with that. I mean, it's better than nothing.
Well, and then that would give us some breathing room to actually have the legislation changed.
Yeah.
So that we could do that.
Because every year we do pay 3.5 every year. Just keep paying it. So it'd be nice to get a return on that money. So.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about any of the options? Anybody have any thoughts on what our next step is?
Talk to a legislator. I mean, is it too late? I mean, they add all kinds of things at the end.
Yeah.
We
I think
pick up
it's probably going to be tough for this legislative session to get any changes enacted, but we know that we need a change in the legislation for the economic development category sublit, or for lit, the subcategory for lit of economic development, because any additions to that just have to go to homestead credits. And so we don't get to use that like every other county gets to use it. So that's one thing that we're going to need to change anyway. So this might be
How about
an opportunity.
Scott works up something, and you know, sends out an email and says, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking that could work if we got this passed through legislation."
Mm-hmm. Scott, do you have any idea the pathway to get something like this in front of the legislature?
Put together some sample language for the group and we give it to our legislature. Local legislators for the next session.
Especially if the school approved that at consent message, then look at those things. It's not just
Okay.
information.
Okay. Alrighty. Is everybody good with waiting to do that until like the fall time frame, when they might be more receptive and open to looking at it?
I would rather get out in front of them right now, so at least let them get them thinking about it right now, so they're not blindsided in the fall. You know, I mean, I just look at it the sooner the better, in my opinion. They might say no, I'm not going to do anything with it, but it's in the back of their mind.
I think Harold and I can tinker with the language enough to bring it back to the board and say, does this board like it? Run it past Amanda Black. Does that help with the fiduciary of the prudent investor language, the way we carved it out? Then that way you can send it to them. They're going to change it, but if you, the more simplified,
Right.
easier way of communicating what you're actually attempting to do is the point. That's attempting to boil it down to something that is as simple as it really is. Attempting to have a gateway to have loans locally for redevelopment projects.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion on this topic? Okay. Can we move on to the attorney's report?
That was the report.
Well, that was your report. We have another attorney. Okay. Any other matter that may properly come before the board? Anybody like to make a comment about? Alrighty. Meeting's adjourned.
Good idea. Thank you. Hey, I got to run it.